The train whistle screamed, a long, mournful sound that echoed through the wide-open plains. Charlotte Hayes clutched her worn carpetbag, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. After days of travel, Silver Hollow finally shimmered into view, a scattering of buildings baking under the relentless sun. This was it, her new life. As the train lurched to a halt, dust swirled around her ankles. She stepped onto the wooden platform, her eyes scanning the small crowd. She searched for a familiar face, but Elias Walker was a stranger. She only knew him from letters, filled with promises of a shared future. A tall, gaunt man with weary eyes and a shadowed face stood apart from the others. He wore a worn brown coat and a dusty hat pulled low. It had to be him. "Mr. Walker?" Charlotte asked, her voice barely a whisper above the clatter of the train. He nodded curtly, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before shifting away. "Charlotte," he acknowledged, his voice rough. He didn't offer a smile or a handshake, just a brief, almost reluctant greeting. The silence stretched between them as he picked up her bag. The weight of it seemed to add to the burden he already carried. He led her to a beat-up wagon, the wooden wheels groaning in protest as they started down the dusty main street. Silver Hollow was smaller and more worn than she had imagined. The buildings were faded, paint peeling, and the air hung heavy with dust and disappointment. The town seemed to sigh under the weight of the sun. Her initial feeling of excitement began to dwindle, replaced by a knot of apprehension in her stomach. The ride to the ranch was long and bumpy, the wagon jostling her bones. Elias remained silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Charlotte tried to make conversation, asking about the town, the ranch, anything to fill the awkward void, but he offered only short, clipped answers. His silence was a wall, keeping her at a distance. This was not the warm welcome she had dreamed of. Her hope felt as parched as the dry land around them. She wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. The ranch, when they finally reached it, was even more disheartening than the town. The house, a small, weathered structure, sagged under the weight of neglect. The paint was peeling, the porch boards were rotting, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. The barn, once a proud structure, listed to one side, its roof riddled with holes. As Elias helped her down from the wagon, Charlotte tried to hide her disappointment. It has character," she offered weakly, hoping to find some glimmer of optimism. Elias just grunted, his gaze sweeping over the dilapidated buildings. "It's seen better days," he admitted, his voice flat. He led her inside, and the interior was no better. Dust motes danced in the dim light that filtered through the grimy windows. The furniture was old and worn, covered in faded floral patterns. The air smelled of dust and decay. "I'll show you your room," Elias said, his voice devoid of emotion. He led her down a narrow hallway to a small, sparsely furnished room. A narrow bed, a rickety dresser, and a small, cracked mirror were the only furnishings. "This will be fine," Charlotte said, trying to sound enthusiastic, though her heart sank. As she started to unpack, Elias stood in the doorway, his presence heavy and awkward. "My wife, Sarah. She passed away last year," he said, his voice barely audible. She took care of this place." Charlotte stopped unpacking, her heart going out to him. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. He nodded, his eyes filled with a deep, unyielding sadness. "Liam, my son, he hasn't taken it well." So that was it. Grief hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It explained Elias's coldness, his silence, the state of the ranch. He wasn't just unwelcoming. He was heartbroken. The weight of his loss pressed down on everything. Charlotte understood then that she hadn't just come to a new home. She had stepped into a place of mourning. Building a new life here would be more challenging than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just about fixing up the ranch. It was about helping Elias and Liam heal, about bringing life back into a place that had been consumed by sorrow. The next morning, Charlotte awoke to the sound of a rooster crowing. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen, hoping to make breakfast. She found Elias already there, sitting at the table, staring into a cup of coffee. A young boy, perhaps 10 years old, sat across from him, his face sullen and closed off. This must be Liam. Good morning, Charlotte said, trying to sound cheerful. Elias nodded curtly, not bothering to introduce her. Liam didn't even look up. I thought I'd make some breakfast, Charlotte offered, but Elias stopped her. I'll take care of it, he said, his voice flat. He rose and began to prepare a simple meal of bacon and eggs, his movements mechanical and efficient. Charlotte stood awkwardly, feeling like an intruder. Liam continued to stare at the table, his silence a palpable barrier. After breakfast, Elias told Liam to do his chores and then turned to Charlotte. There's not much for you to do here, he said bluntly. I can handle the ranch work. His words stung. She had come here to help, to build a life with him, but he seemed determined to keep her at arm's length. I want to help, she insisted. I can cook, clean, tend to the garden. We don't have a garden, he said, cutting her off. And I can manage the cooking and cleaning. Liam watched them from the corner of his eye, his expression unreadable. Charlotte realized that she wasn't just facing Elias's grief. She was also dealing with Liam's resentment. He probably saw her as a replacement for his mother, an unwelcome intruder in their lives. Throughout the day, Charlotte tried to find ways to make herself useful, but Elias and Liam seemed to actively avoid her. Elias busied himself with ranch work, ignoring her attempts to help. Liam disappeared for hours, only returning for meals, his eyes filled with suspicion and hostility. As the sun began to set, Charlotte felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had come to Silver Hollow full of hope, but she was quickly realizing that she had stepped into a situation far more complicated than she had ever imagined. She was an outsider, unwelcome and unwanted. She wondered if she would ever be able to break through the wall of grief and resentment that surrounded her. Perhaps she had made a terrible mistake. Despite the chilly reception, Charlotte refused to be discouraged. She knew that breaking through Elias and Liam's grief wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to make a place for herself on the ranch. She decided that if they wouldn't let her help inside the house, she would find something else to do. The next morning, she rose before dawn. Elias and Liam were still asleep when she slipped outside. She surveyed the yard, her eyes scanning the overgrown weeds and the dilapidated buildings. The ranch was a mess, but she saw potential beneath the neglect. She started with the yard, pulling weeds and clearing debris. The work was hard, and the sun beat down mercilessly, but Charlotte persevered. She imagined Sarah, Elias's late wife, tending to the yard with love and care. She wanted to honor her memory by bringing life back to this place. As she worked, she noticed the small, neglected patch of earth behind the house. It looked like it might have been a garden once, but it was now choked with weeds and dry, cracked soil. An idea sparked in her mind. She spent the rest of the day clearing the garden, pulling weeds, and turning the soil. Her hands were blistered and her back ached, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. She knew that with some care and attention, she could bring the garden back to life. That evening, as she ate dinner with Elias and Liam, she noticed that they both seemed surprised by her absence earlier in the day. Liam even glanced at her with a hint of curiosity. I was working in the yard, she explained, meeting their gazes. I'm going to try to bring the garden back to life. Elias frowned. It's a waste of time, he said dismissively. The soil's no good. I'm willing to try, Charlotte said, her voice firm. I think it could be good for the ranch. Liam remained silent, but Charlotte saw a flicker of interest in his eyes. Perhaps, she thought, she was finally starting to make a small dent in their wall of grief. She would continue to work hard, to show them that she was here to stay, and that she was determined to help them rebuild their lives, even if it meant starting with a small, neglected garden. Days turned into weeks, and Charlotte continued to work tirelessly on the garden. She coaxed life back into the dry soil, adding compost and watering it diligently. She even managed to find some old seeds in the barn, beans, carrots, and a few herbs. She planted them with care, hoping they would sprout. Elias remained skeptical, but he no longer actively discouraged her. He would watch her from a distance as she worked, his expression unreadable. Liam, however, started to show more interest. He would often come out to the garden and watch her, asking questions about the plants and the soil. One afternoon, as Charlotte was weeding, Liam approached her hesitantly. Can I help? he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Charlotte smiled. Of course you can, she said. Here, try pulling these weeds. Make sure you get the roots. Liam knelt beside her and began to pull the weeds, his small hands working diligently. He didn't say much, but Charlotte could sense a shift in his attitude. He was starting to trust her, to see her as something other than an intruder. As they worked together, Charlotte told him stories about her own childhood, about her love for gardening, and about her hopes for the ranch. Liam listened intently, his eyes wide with fascination. He even started to share stories about his mother, about the things they used to do together in the garden. Slowly, the garden began to flourish. Green shoots emerged from the soil, and the air filled with the scent of herbs and flowers. The garden became a sanctuary, a place where Charlotte and Liam could connect and heal. One evening, as they were watering the plants, Elias came out to the garden. He stood there for a moment, his gaze sweeping over the flourishing plants. A hint of a smile touched his lips. It looks good, Charlotte, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. You've done a good job. Charlotte's heart soared. It was a small compliment, but it meant the world to her. She had finally started to earn Elias's respect, and she knew that she was slowly breaking through his wall of grief. The garden, it seemed, was not just bringing life back to the ranch. It was bringing life back to their hearts as well. The growing garden brought more than just beauty to the ranch. It also provided fresh vegetables for their meals. Charlotte started cooking more, experimenting with the herbs and vegetables she had grown. She found that Elias and Liam both enjoyed her cooking, and mealtimes became less strained, filled with tentative conversation and even laughter. However, the newfound harmony was threatened by a looming problem: money. The ranch was struggling financially. Elias had been relying on dwindling savings and the occasional sale of livestock, but it wasn't enough. The barn needed repairs, the cattle needed feed, and the bills were piling up. One evening, after dinner, Elias sat at the table, his face etched with worry. Charlotte watched him, her heart heavy. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. Elias sighed. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this ranch going," he admitted. "We're running out of money." Charlotte's heart sank. She had seen the signs, but she had hoped that things weren't as bad as they seemed. "Is there anything I can do?" she asked. Elias shook his head. "I've tried everything," he said. "There's nothing left to sell." Liam, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "What about the quilts?" he asked. Elias looked at him, confused. "What quilts?" "Mom's quilts," Liam said. "She made so many of them. Could we sell them?" Elias's face clouded with sadness. "I don't know, Liam," he said. "Those quilts were special to her." Charlotte saw an opportunity. "I think it's a wonderful idea," she said. "They're beautiful, and people would pay good money for them." Elias hesitated, torn between his sentimental attachment to the quilts and the desperate need for money. Finally, he nodded. "All right," he said. "We could try." Charlotte felt a surge of hope. Selling the quilts wouldn't solve all their problems, but it was a start, and it was a way to honor Sarah's memory while also saving the ranch. She knew that with hard work and a little bit of luck, they could overcome this challenge. But she also knew that this was just the beginning of their troubles. There was another storm brewing on the horizon. The next day, Charlotte began to sort through Sarah's quilts. They were beautiful, each one a masterpiece of color and design. She carefully folded them and packed them into a wagon, ready to take them into town. As she prepared to leave, Elias stopped her. "Be careful," he said, his voice gruff. "There's a man in town, Harlan Briggs, who's been trying to buy up land. He might try to take advantage of you." Charlotte frowned. "What do you mean?" "He's a bully," Elias explained. "He'll try to lowball you on the quilts, or even try to take them by force. Just be careful." Charlotte's heart sank. She had hoped that selling the quilts would be a simple solution, but it seemed that nothing was ever easy. "I'll be careful," she promised. As she drove the wagon into town, she kept a watchful eye out for Harlan Briggs. She soon spotted him, a large, imposing man with a cruel face and a menacing presence. He was standing in front of the general store, watching her intently. Charlotte ignored him and drove straight to the mercantile, hoping to find a fair price for the quilts. The owner, a kind-faced woman named Martha, examined the quilts with admiration. "These are beautiful," she said. Sarah was a talented quilter. Charlotte agreed. "We're hoping to sell them to help save the ranch." Martha nodded sympathetically. "I know things have been tough," she said. "I'll give you a fair price for them." As Martha began to negotiate a price, Harlan Briggs entered the mercantile. He strode up to the counter, his eyes fixed on the quilts. "Those are Walker quilts, aren't they?" he said, his voice booming. Martha nodded nervously. "Yes, Mr. Briggs," she said. "Charlotte is hoping to sell them." Harlan Briggs turned to Charlotte, his eyes narrowed. "I'll give you $50 for all of them," he said. Charlotte gasped. "That's not nearly enough," she protested. "They're worth much more than that." "That's my offer," Harlan Briggs said, his voice menacing. "Take it or leave it." Charlotte knew that he was trying to intimidate her, but she refused to back down. "I'm not selling them to you," she said, her voice firm. "I'd rather give them away." Harlan Briggs's face darkened with anger. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low and threatening. "This isn't over." He turned and stormed out of the mercantile, leaving Charlotte shaken but determined. She knew that she had made an enemy, but she refused to let him bully her. She would find a way to save the ranch, even if it meant standing up to the most powerful man in town. Back at the ranch, Charlotte told Elias about her encounter with Harlan Briggs. Elias's face grew grim. "I told you he was trouble," he said. "He won't let this go." "What are we going to do?" Charlotte asked, her voice filled with concern. "We have to be careful," Elias said. "He'll try to find a way to take the ranch from us." That night, Charlotte couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, her mind racing with worry. She knew that Harlan Briggs was a dangerous man, and she was afraid of what he might do. The next morning, she woke up with a plan. She realized that she couldn't face Harlan Briggs alone. She needed help. She decided to talk to the other women in town. Maybe they could band together and find a way to protect themselves and their families. She started by visiting Martha, the owner of the mercantile. She told her about her encounter with Harlan Briggs and asked for her advice. Martha listened intently, her face filled with concern. "Harlan Briggs has been a problem for a long time," she said. "He's been trying to buy up land and control the town. He's a bully, and he gets away with it because people are afraid of him." "We can't let him get away with it anymore," Charlotte said. "We have to stand up to him." Martha nodded. "You're right," she said. "But what can we do?" "I have an idea," Charlotte said. "What if we organized a quilting bee? We could all work together to make quilts, and then we could sell them to raise money. We could use the money to help support our families and protect ourselves from Harlan Briggs." Martha's eyes lit up. "That's a wonderful idea," she said. "I'm sure the other women would be happy to help." Charlotte and Martha spent the rest of the day visiting the other women in town, explaining their plan and asking for their support. To their surprise, every single woman agreed to participate. They were all tired of being bullied by Harlan Briggs, and they were ready to fight back. The women decided to hold the quilting bee at the church hall. They gathered together their fabric scraps, their needles, and their thread, and they began to work. The air filled with the hum of conversation and the rhythmic click of needles. As they worked, they shared stories, offered support, and forged a bond of friendship and solidarity. They were no longer just individuals. They were a community united by a common goal. They would protect their families and their town, no matter what it took. And Harlan Briggs would soon learn that he couldn't mess with the women of Silver Hollow. The quilting bee became the heart of Silver Hollow. Every day, the women gathered at the church hall, their needles flying, their voices filling the air with laughter and stories. They worked together, sharing patterns, offering advice, and supporting each other through thick and thin. The quilts they created were beautiful, each one a testament to their skill and creativity. They used scraps of fabric from old dresses, shirts, and blankets, transforming them into works of art. They sewed in memories, hopes, and dreams, creating quilts that were not just beautiful, but also filled with meaning. As the quilts piled up, the women began to plan a sale. They advertised in the local newspaper and spread the word throughout the surrounding towns. They hoped that people would come from far and wide to purchase their quilts and support their cause. On the day of the sale, the church hall was packed with people. Men, women, and children crowded around the tables, admiring the quilts and haggling over prices. The women of Silver Hollow beamed with pride as they sold their creations, knowing that they were making a difference. The sale was a huge success. They raised more money than they had ever imagined. They used the money to pay off the ranch's debts, repair the barn, and buy new supplies. They also set aside a portion of the money to help other families in town who were struggling financially. The success of the quilting bee and the quilt sale had a profound impact on Silver Hollow. It brought the community together, empowered the women, and showed Harlan Briggs that he couldn't bully them anymore. The women had proven that they were strong, resilient, and capable of anything they set their minds to. Elias watched from a distance, his heart filled with a mixture of pride and gratitude. He had never seen the women of Silver Hollow so united and so determined. He realized that Charlotte had brought something special to their town, a sense of hope, a spirit of community, and a willingness to stand up for what was right. He knew that he had been wrong to keep her at arm's length. She was not just a replacement for Sarah. She was a strong, capable woman who was making a real difference in their lives, and he was starting to fall in love with her. But Harlan Briggs was not one to give up easily. He was furious that the women had defied him, and he was determined to get his revenge. He was plotting something, and Charlotte knew that they had to be ready for whatever he had in store. The peace they had found was fragile, and she knew that they would have to fight to protect it. A few weeks after the quilt sale, a fire broke out at the Walker Ranch. It started in the barn, and it spread quickly, fueled by dry hay and strong winds. Elias and Liam were awakened by the smell of smoke, and they rushed outside to find the barn engulfed in flames. Charlotte, who was staying in the main house, woke up to the commotion and ran outside to help. She saw Elias and Liam desperately trying to put out the fire with buckets of water, but it was no use. The flames were too strong, and the barn was quickly collapsing. The fire threatened to spread to the house, and Elias knew that they had to do something fast. "Get the cattle out," he shouted to Liam. "And Charlotte, get as much water as you can." Liam raced to the pasture to release the cattle, while Charlotte ran back and forth between the well and the house, soaking blankets and draping them over the walls to protect them from the flames. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the women of Silver Hollow arrived. They had seen the smoke from town and had rushed to the ranch to help. They came with buckets of water, axes, and shovels, and they joined the fight against the fire. Together, the community fought valiantly against the flames. They formed a bucket brigade, passing water from the well to the fire, and they chopped down trees to create a firebreak. They worked tirelessly, their faces blackened with soot, their bodies exhausted, but their spirits undeterred. After hours of hard work, they finally managed to extinguish the fire. The barn was destroyed, but they had saved the house and the cattle. The ranch was damaged, but it was not lost. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the smoldering ruins, the women of Silver Hollow stood together, exhausted but proud. They had faced a terrible challenge, and they had overcome it together. They had proven that they were a strong and resilient community, capable of anything they set their minds to. Elias looked at Charlotte, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse. "You saved our ranch." Charlotte smiled. "We saved your ranch," she corrected. "We did it together." Elias nodded, his heart filled with a newfound respect for Charlotte and for the women of Silver Hollow. He knew that he had been wrong to underestimate them. They were the heart and soul of their community, and he was lucky to have them in his life. But he also knew that the fire was no accident. He suspected that Harlan Briggs was behind it, and he was determined to make him pay. In the days that followed the fire, the community rallied once more to help the Walkers rebuild. Men came from all over the county to help rebuild the barn, donating their time and skills. Women brought food and supplies, ensuring that Elias, Liam, and Charlotte had everything they needed. As they worked side by side, Charlotte and Elias began to grow closer. They shared stories, dreams, and fears. They laughed together, cried together, and supported each other through the difficult times. Elias began to open up about his grief, sharing memories of Sarah and expressing his regrets. Charlotte listened patiently, offering comfort and understanding. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Watching the sunset, Elias turned to Charlotte, his eyes filled with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said. "You've brought so much light into our lives." Charlotte smiled. "I'm just glad I could help," she said. Elias reached out and took her hand. "You're more than just a helper, Charlotte," he said. "You're a friend, a partner, and I think I'm falling in love with you." Charlotte's heart fluttered. She had been falling in love with Elias for a long time, but she had been afraid to admit it, even to herself. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she said. They sat in silence for a moment, their hands clasped tightly together, the warmth of their love filling the air. The fire had brought them together, forging a bond that was stronger than ever before. But their happiness was short-lived. Elias knew that Harlan Briggs was responsible for the fire, and he was determined to bring him to justice. He decided to confront Briggs, even if it meant putting himself in danger. He couldn't let Briggs continue to terrorize their community. He had to stop him, once and for all. He knew it was dangerous, but he had to protect Charlotte, Liam, and the rest of Silver Hollow. He wouldn't let Briggs win. This was his home, and he would defend it with everything he had. Charlotte was terrified when Elias told her he was going to confront Harlan Briggs. She knew that Briggs was a dangerous man, and she was afraid that Elias would get hurt. She tried to talk him out of it, but he was determined. "I have to do this, Charlotte," he said. "I can't let him keep terrorizing our town." "But what if he hurts you?" Charlotte asked, her voice trembling. "I'll be careful," Elias promised. "But I can't back down. I have to stand up to him." Charlotte knew that she couldn't change his mind. She decided to go with him. She couldn't let him face Briggs alone. Together, Elias and Charlotte rode into town, their faces grim. They found Harlan Briggs at the saloon, surrounded by his cronies. Elias strode up to Briggs, his eyes blazing with anger. "You set fire to my barn," he said, his voice low and menacing. Briggs sneered. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Don't lie to me," Elias said. "I know it was you." Briggs stood up, his face contorted with rage. "You can't prove anything," he said. "I don't need proof," Elias said. "I know in my heart." The two men stared at each other, their bodies tense, the air thick with animosity. A fight was inevitable. Suddenly, Charlotte stepped forward. "This has to stop," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We can't let violence solve our problems." Briggs laughed. "What are you going to do, little lady?" he sneered. "Sew me a quilt." Charlotte didn't back down. "We're not afraid of you, Harlan Briggs," she said. "The women of Silver Hollow are united, and we won't let you bully us anymore." At that moment, the women of Silver Hollow emerged from the surrounding buildings. They stood together, their faces determined, their eyes fixed on Harlan Briggs. They had come to support Charlotte and Elias, and to show Briggs that they would not be intimidated. Briggs looked around, his face paling with fear. He realized that he was outnumbered, outgunned, and outsmarted. He had underestimated the women of Silver Hollow, and he had made a terrible mistake. He turned and fled, his cronies scattering in his wake. The women of Silver Hollow had won. They had stood up to the bully, and they had driven him out of town. Elias looked at Charlotte, his heart filled with pride and love. "You did it," he said. "You saved our town." Charlotte smiled. "We did it together," she said. As they rode back to the ranch, hand in hand, they knew that they had a bright future ahead of them. They had faced many challenges, but they had overcome them together. They had found love, built a community, and saved their town. And they knew that they could face anything as long as they had each other. With Harlan Briggs gone, Silver Hollow began to heal. The women continued to quilt, creating beautiful works of art that were sold far and wide, bringing prosperity to the town. The ranch flourished, the garden overflowing with vegetables and flowers. Liam grew into a fine young man, learning the value of hard work and community. Elias, too, had transformed. The grief that had consumed him for so long began to fade, replaced by a sense of hope and joy. He had learned to love again, to trust again, and to embrace the future. He saw Sarah not as a ghost haunting their lives, but as a cherished memory that had helped shape who he was. One sunny afternoon, as they were working in the garden, Elias knelt before Charlotte, a small, silver ring in his hand. "Charlotte," he said, his voice filled with love. Will you marry me? Charlotte's eyes filled with tears of joy. Yes, Elias, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Yes, I will. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, held in the garden that Charlotte had brought back to life. The women of Silver Hollow decorated the space with flowers and quilts, creating a beautiful and festive atmosphere. Liam stood proudly by his father's side, his face beaming with happiness. As Charlotte walked down the aisle, her heart filled with joy, she saw Elias standing at the end of the aisle, his eyes shining with love. He looked handsome in his best suit, and Liam stood proudly beside him, a miniature version of his father. Martha, the owner of the mercantile, officiated the ceremony. She spoke of love, commitment, and the importance of community. She reminded everyone of the challenges they had faced and the strength they had found in each other. As Elias and Charlotte exchanged vows, their voices trembled with emotion. They promised to love each other, to support each other, and to face whatever challenges life might bring, together. When they exchanged rings, Elias placed Sarah's silver ring on Charlotte's finger, a symbol of his past and his future. Charlotte placed a simple gold band on Elias's finger, a symbol of her love and commitment. As Martha pronounced them husband and wife, Elias and Charlotte embraced, their hearts overflowing with love. The women of Silver Hollow cheered and applauded, showering them with flowers and blessings. After the ceremony, the guests celebrated with food, music, and dancing. They ate the vegetables that Charlotte had grown in her garden, and they danced to the music played by a local band. They laughed, they sang, and they celebrated the love of Elias and Charlotte. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the ranch, Elias and Charlotte stood together, hand in hand, watching their guests celebrate. They had found love in the most unexpected place, and they had built a life together that was filled with joy, peace, and love. As the days turned into weeks, Charlotte settled into her new role as wife and stepmother. She loved Elias with all her heart, and she was determined to be a good mother to Liam. Liam, who had initially been wary of Charlotte, had grown to love her as well. He saw her as a friend, a confidant, and a source of support. He helped her in the garden, he told her about his day at school, and he shared his dreams for the future. Together, Elias, Charlotte, and Liam formed a strong and loving family. They faced challenges together, they celebrated successes together, and they supported each other through thick and thin. They had created a home filled with laughter, love, and understanding. Charlotte often thought about her journey to Silver Hollow, about the hope and trepidation she had felt as she stepped off the train. She had never imagined that she would find such love and happiness in this small, dusty town. She had come to Silver Hollow seeking a new life, and she had found so much more. She had found a family, a community, and a purpose. She knew that their life would not always be easy. There would be challenges ahead, but she was confident that they could face anything as long as they had each other. They had built a strong foundation of love, trust, and community, and they were ready to face whatever the future might hold. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the stars, Liam turned to Charlotte and said, "I'm glad you came to Silver Hollow, Charlotte. You've made our lives so much better." Charlotte smiled and hugged him tightly. "I'm glad I came too," she said. "This is my home now. This is my family." Elias put his arm around both of them, drawing them close. He looked out at the stars, his heart filled with gratitude. He had lost so much, but he had also gained so much more. He had found love, he had found a community, and he had found a purpose. The ranch flourished in the years that followed. The garden grew bigger and more bountiful, providing food for the family and for the town. The cattle thrived, bringing prosperity to the ranch. Liam excelled in school, showing a keen interest in science and a natural talent for leadership. Elias and Charlotte continued to work side by side, supporting each other through every challenge and celebrating every success. They built a life filled with love, laughter, and purpose. As they grew older, they watched Liam grow into a fine young man, ready to take on the world. He eventually left Silver Hollow to attend college. promising to return one day to help run the ranch. Elias and Charlotte knew that their journey had been long and difficult, but they were grateful for every step of the way. They had learned the value of community, the importance of perseverance, and the power of love. As they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, they knew that they had created a legacy that would last for generations. They had transformed a dilapidated ranch into a thriving home, a grieving town into a vibrant community, and a life filled with sorrow into a life filled with joy. Their future, like the sunset before them, was bright with hope and promise. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, they knew that they had finally found their happily ever after.